Welcome. Thank you for joining today's interactive budget webinar. I'm Dan Vopel, Executive Director of Communications for Tacoma Public Schools. I'd like to share how today's webinar will work. First, we will have some introductory remarks by Superintendent Josh Garcia. Then we'll start with a budget presentation by our Chief Financial Officer, Rosalind Medina. She'll be sharing information about the proposed 2021-22 budget. And immediately following today's budget presentation, you'll have the opportunity to dive deeper and ask questions by participating in a breakout session of your choice. These breakout sessions will be focused around our district's.
You rolled over and bites you, and I tried it.
These are being recorded. We'd like to have everyone please mute your microphones. The strategic plan goals are academic excellence, partnerships, early learning, operations, and health and safety. And I'll share how to join a breakout session a little later, and you'll be able to see a link posted in the chat section of this webinar. We are recording this session, as I mentioned, and if you'd prefer not to be on camera during the recording, feel free to turn it off by clicking on the camera icon at the top of your screen. And if we could advance the slide, you'll see that we have a slide that shows this is highlighted in red. I'd also like to ask that everyone mute their microphones by clicking on the microphone button at the top of your screen, highlighted here in purple. Now, if you are joining us by phone, your features may look a little different depending on what phone you're using. Now, to get us started, I'd like to introduce our superintendent, Dr. Josh Garcia, who will have some opening remarks. Josh.
Thank you, Dan. Good evening. As Dan mentioned, my name is Josh Garcia. I'm the superintendent of Tacoma Public Schools. We're here to talk to you about our district's budget and how it supports the district strategic plan. And we're excited because this is a very important conversation in how we operate and how we work as a school system to provide resources to both students and staff and community. Tacoma Public Schools operates on a 2-year budget cycle that is aligned to the state legislative cycle. So as you can see on this slide, that we are also in our first year of a 2-year cycle, and we have incorporated requests from individual departments who ask for resources based on their alignment to our strategic initiatives across the district that are grounded in the strategic plan. Over the next 30 minutes, we will share with you a couple of exciting opportunities. First, an overview of our budget plan for the upcoming year. So you'll get to see what we're planning for and be able to provide comment at a later time. Second, we're going to provide you information on how our strategic goal focused breakout sessions immediately following the budget presentation. And that will give us an opportunity to dive deeper into one of the strategic plan 5 goals, as Dan mentioned. And then we're going to find out where you can find more information on the proposed budget and how you can participate in the hearing prior to the budget adoption for July 22nd. So we will be having a hearing where the members of the community will be able to provide testimony prior to a adoption, which is we are currently scheduled for July 22nd. So with that, I'm very excited and proud to introduce Ms. Rosalind Medina, our CFO, and she will give us a presentation of the overall budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josh and Dan. My name is Rosalind Medina, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Tacoma Public Schools. And I'm excited to be here this evening and have the opportunity to prepare information for you. It's not often that we have an opportunity to do this, only once a year. And interestingly, 8 years ago, our school board asked that we retool our budget process, and they wanted us to bring alignment and meaning to their strategic initiatives. That work resulted in the development of a budgeting process that was intended to find a way to meet the most impact for students. Through the development of our budgeting by priorities process, we also aligned our budget cycle to the state's budget cycle. And so many of our revenues are derived from the state that seemed to make sense. The build for the budget for the 2021 or for the 21-22 school year, the district ran the full budgeting by priorities cycle where we achieved all the steps on the diagram here to the right. It's a very intensive and months-long process where we ask our budget writers to specify what they'll be working to achieve and which strategic plan benchmarks and programs they're intending to support or progress. And a district team then decides the funding levels of the programs before the adoption of the budget. This is the work that went into the development of the budget that we'll be submitting for adoption on July 22nd and sharing with you this evening. Our annual budget calendar has standard expectations and legal requirements, including we have to wait for the legislature to finalize. We need to have a budget document submitted to our educational service district by July 10th, and we have to adopt a budget no later than August 31st. We have a copy of our preliminary budget posted on our website, tacomaschools.org/budget. You can also join our budget hearing, as Josh mentioned, as well as attend the adoption of the budget for July 22nd. If you want to go out and see where to join the meeting for the hearings, you can search on the Tacoma Budget webpage. There's a link for joining or how to participate in the hearing. Tacoma is one of 5 districts in the state of Washington that follows generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP. In alignment with GAAP and the state recording requirements, we follow a system of governmental accounting for funds. Each box here represents a separate fund operated by the district, and each fund is a separate checkbook with rules and requirements on how the monies can be used. As an example, monies that we receive for our capital and technology levy can be used to build buildings or implement new technology, but they cannot be used for everyday operations. Regular everyday operations of the school district occur only in our general fund, which is the budget we'll be talking about today. Our total preliminary revenues for the 21-22 year are planned at $553.9 million. You can see that the large blue box of state funding is 65.7% of our resources. State revenues are driven by enrollment in the district or in special state-funded programs like career and technical or special education programs. Another important revenue source is our enrichment levy. It's $74.5 million for the next year, which is located in the yellow box. It accounts for 13.4% of our total budget. Our students understand the importance of these resources, and we're incredibly appreciative to the voters of Tacoma for continuing to support our levy services. We're also projecting to receive up to 18% of our budget in federal dollars, which are in the gray and the orange boxes. The gray box includes $52.4 million of new one-time stabilization dollars called ESSER. Additionally, 1.5% of our budget is in local non-tax revenues. That's the light blue box, which is like interest, student fees, facility rentals. And then lastly, in the small green box at the bottom right of the chart, we have about 1.3% of our revenues, which includes anything that's not defined anywhere else on this slide. For our state revenues, we receive approximately $9,450 for each full-time enrolled student. Those student counts are also used to drive our staff revenues from the state and define the number of staff salaries and benefits that the state will provide. We then use levy dollars on top of that to provide for any of the needs for our community, knowing that in all cases, the needs will likely exceed the funds we have available to us. With enrollment being our primary driver of state revenue, on our official count date, which will be October of 21, we're anticipating enrollment of 27,554 students. This does not include Running Start, Open Doors, or preschool students because they have separate funding models. But with those programs included, our enrollment is nearly 29,000 students. Looking back at the last 10 years, our enrollment has only grown by 75 students. And over the next 10 years, we anticipate a decline of around 13 students. So it's pretty much a flat trend over time. It is important to note the pandemic did create a significant disruption in our enrollment with the loss of nearly 1,100 students this year. We're projecting to gain about 75% of those students back in the upcoming year, but we will not recover to pre-pandemic levels for years to come, according to the demographer that we work with. To look more closely at how we spend our district resources, we've broken out our costs by state codes. We're budgeting to spend $587.2 million in 21-22. And of that, $247.4 million will support certificated salaries. That's anyone who holds a certificate. $84.4 million will support classified salaries, and $115.6 million will be spent on payroll taxes and benefits. Salaries and benefits in this budget represent 76.2% of the total costs of the district. Now that percentage is quite a bit lower than our average, our typical salary and benefit rates. It's usually closer to 85% that we see in a normal year. This year it's a little off, partly because of ESSER, partly because of the pandemic. Beyond that, the district plans to spend about 9% of our resources on contractual services, which is the yellow box. And in the light blue box, you have 14.4% for supplies and materials. Last, you'll notice two tiny little dark blue and green boxes off to the right in the bottom. And those are our budgets for $500,000 for travel and $1.6 million for large equipment activities. They represent less than 0.5% of our budget. In our previous slide, I indicated that salaries and benefits make up 76% of the 21-22 budget. This graph clarifies the staff that we've planned for the proposed budget, including 2,068 certificated staff, which includes teachers, nurses, counselors, psychologists, and those types of certificated staff. And then our next largest group includes 504 paraeducator supports who provide direct support to students, interpretive services, and health room support. Together, these two groups represent 71% of our total staffing. We have 11 different groups of staff and a total of 3,625 total budgeted staff full-time equivalents. Switching gears briefly, I know I'll mention ESSER a couple of times tonight, and ESSER stands for the Elementary and Secondary Emergency Relief Funds. These are funds that were provided to us from the federal government for stabilization. They're one-time funds meant to assist high poverty districts making swift progress towards COVID recovery by addressing new, immediate, or necessary improvements. And they can be related to a broad range of learning enhancements, including health and safety investments or creation or enhancements of other programs that ensure students are on track for progressive learning. It's important to note that these funds are not a replacement for levy or other state funding. Rather, they're provided as a reimbursement for eligible costs over the next 3 years. They cannot be used for routine expenses, and they expire once they're used, so they don't replenish. It's an exciting time to have new opportunities for kids and to be able to provide an opportunity to collaborate with the broader community on how these resources can make an impact for students. We worked to survey different community sectors about these funds, and we are still accepting feedback as we continue to progress monitor the funds. So if you or someone you know has thoughts on comments on how we can use these funds to support students, you can visit Tacoma's website, enter ESSER or ESSER in the Find It Fast feature in the upper right-hand corner of our website, just the website, and there's an option to submit comments there. Here were some of the suggestions that were recommended through our surveying, and we have incorporated these into our financial plan for the ESSER funds. Investments include expanded mental health supports, better ventilation systems in schools, added healthcare services, college prep and internship opportunities, job-related experiences, to name a few. I'm going to switch gears a little more, and we're going to get into a little bit of the deeper information around our budget alignment. And our first goal this evening is Goal 1, Academic Excellence. This is a table that shows the alignment of the budget to each of our strategic plan goals. You can see the investment has been made over the last 4 years on the left, and then the highlighted blue on the right represents the upcoming year. Of note for academic excellence, that 77.65%, or about $456 million of our budget, is aligned to support this goal. Now, that's a significant increase over what we see in the previous year, but a large part of that is due to ESSER funds, which will be temporary. Here are the 11 largest programs attributable to the strategic plan goal of academic excellence. And these 11 programs represent 84% of our academic excellence spending. You'll see in the orange the highest area of revenue indicating the primary revenue source for the program. State-funded programs are generally calculated through a formula that's tied to enrollment of either the district or the specific program. In total, we allocate around 37% of our enrichment levy receipts to the academic excellence goal. I know that there's quite a bit of detail in these slides, and they'll be available on our website for your continued review. For the sake of time, and because you may not want to live and breathe the budget like we do, you can feel free to go out and examine them at your leisure. Looking at those same 11 programs, here is how we spent the money to support our goals. You see in the orange that the major investment is made primarily in salaries and benefits. While I told you that the district's overall budget is made up of 76% salaries and benefits, you can see here that we're investing in staffing supports at a much higher level than the average. This represents what we would expect, that the educators and the supports providing direct service to students will make the greatest impact on academic achievements, so we've aligned those resources accordingly. This is true with a couple of exceptions. Our graduation re-engagement program is a partnership. We contract with the Tacoma Community College, Goodwill Industries, and some online learning programs. So that's through contractual services. And also our curriculum and instruction are naturally used to provide books and material updates. And then finally, our ESSER funds, which are the one-time funds, we ended up budgeting those in materials and supplies. We want to be careful not to add too many ongoing salary costs because we will have to end those services likely once the ESSER funds run out. This slide shares an example of the various programs that we support within the academic excellence proposal set, but there are other supports that are not called out specifically here. These programs and activities are designed to support the varying needs of students. One other important note is that the majority of these programs are also funded through our enrichment levy, so that our voter support directly translates to supports for students. Looking on to goal 2 is our partnership goal. At that same slide that lists out the comparative years, here you can see the investment in partnership strategic plan goal, 0.19% of our budget, or about $1.1 million is aligned to the partnerships goal. We've made some added investments in this goal for the preliminary budget, and that increase is reflected here. We have 5 budget proposals that are within the partnership goal, and they are all funded through our enrichment levy. Our voter improved enrichment levy means that activities we fund must be spent on supports that go beyond what the state provides funding for. While programs that are funded using the levy dollars offer the greatest flexibility for the district, we do have some significant limitations on how we can use levy funds. These limitations make our partnerships important. The organization and coordination of this support from our community fills the gaps of students and families in need, where the district is unable to provide those services due to legal or funding limitations. Partnerships represent about 1.5% of our total levy resources. Within each of our proposals under partnership, we have listed here how those resources are spent. Funds are spent providing staff and organizing activities or on contracting services to perform activities. Our partnership office is involved in a myriad of programs. This list represents examples of some of the work that we are doing, but there are many other supports that are not specifically called out here. Notice that these partnerships and supports are not just about students. We're working to support the various needs of community and students so that they can come together and we can all show our collective support for the importance of education as a community. Moving quickly on to goal number 3. Early learning is our third goal in the strategic plan. Of note, the early learning strategic plan goal represents about 2.5% or $14.6 million worth of our budget. You can see that there was a decline in the percentage of budget that we're planning to invest in the early learning goal. However, when we went in and reviewed the total investment in early learning, the funding really had remained consistent, but because the total budget for the district had increased, the percentage of the budget represented in the goal here just declined due to, the math did it. We have our 4 budget proposals attributed to the strategic plan goal of early learning. Many of our preschool programs are designated to support families in need. Our district is unique in the offering of a Head Start program within our school district. And in addition to Head Start, we also offer similar programs, the state's Early Childhood Education Programs, or ECAP, Special Education Peer Model Programs, and Montessori Preschool, which is our only tuition-based program. For those programs that are offered through Head Start, we receive federal funds, through a Head Start grant, and our ECAP programs we receive a state grant for. Special needs 3- and 4-year-olds. Also, if you could mute for me, please. Special needs 3 and 4-year-olds also receive services in our special education and peer model programs, which are partially funded through our levy. And the Montessori funding that is provided for Bryant and Geiger preschool programming is also through our levy. In total, we utilize about 4% of our levy to support this goal. Within each of our proposals under early learning, we have listed how our resources are spent. There's little more than staff to be used in the early learning programs. And incidentally, this work is almost entirely performed by teachers and paraeducators. While there are no state requirements to provide preschool except through special education where certain services are mandated, it's important that Tacoma Schools is committed to early learning. Each program is unique while providing common curriculum that helps prepare students for success in kindergarten and beyond. There are 56 classrooms at more than 30 sites providing service to 3 and 4-year-old future students in all areas of Tacoma. And to further support the early learning goal, we have additional partnerships and options available to parents, including the North Tacoma Cooperative Preschool, Day One Academy sites, which I noticed doesn't have an item here listed, my apologies, Green Trike, and the Multicultural Child and Family Hope Center. Moving on to our 4th strategic plan goal, health and safety. The safety strategic plan goal represents 1.74% of our budget, around $10 million. While this pandemic did change the level of health and safety supports needed for the coming year, and we are including a number of enhanced supports in the preliminary budget, the primary reason for the increased support over previous years noted here is due to the fact that we expanded our safety goal to include health. So proposals that had historically fit within the operations category have been realigned here and are now included in the health and safety goal. There are 4 proposals that support the strategic plan goals of health and safety. These activities are almost entirely funded through our levy sources, including our enrichment levy or grant funding, and represent 12.6% of our total levy dollars. Health services is the proposal that was added to this goal this year, and they help to fund required medical care for students in schools. Through a partnership with, well, I'm sure it's a lot more than that, please don't feel offended by my generalizations. Through a partnership with the Wallace Foundation, we fund a robust social emotional learning practice that emphasizes our whole child initiative to help us proactively support our students' social, emotional, and academic needs. Our safety and security team contracts are 100% levy funded. We received no formal allocation for security services or personnel from the state. Looking at those same health and safety programs, here's how we spend our money on supporting those goals. Health safety primarily funds nurses, LPNs, and other health room supports. Social emotional learnings, primarily salaries and benefits to provide extra work for training to teachers and other district staff so that they can be trained on curriculum and strategies related to social emotional learning. And emergency preparedness primarily pays for inspection services. Our last strategic plan goal for this evening is our newest strategic initiative of operations. Here you'll notice a decline in the operations investment. Again, because the total budget increased, a smaller percentage would be expected. But additionally, as we noted before, we moved some proposals around, and so there was not necessarily comparability as apples to apples as we look from year to year at these slides. These are the 8 largest programs in the strategic plan goal of operations, and these 8 programs represent 75% of our operations spending. Funding for operations is a bit of a mixed bag, with the state providing some level of funding and our levy filling in for the needs the state doesn't cover. State funding for operational activities comes primarily through MSOCs, or state funding formulas for materials, supplies, and operating costs, that's based on the number of students enrolled at the district. All districts in Washington receive the same enrollment based on formula, and MSOC is really a catch-all that's intended to provide funding for all types of support services. The operations goal represents about 25% of our levy. Looking at these same programs, here's how we spend our resources, primarily again on salaries and benefits, while transportation and technology have some contracted services, and nutrition has a larger supplies and materials budget to cover food items. It is fun to note that approximately 18% of all of our staff are represented under this strategic goal. The operations functions are widespread and support varying aspects that are necessary to fulfill our legal requirements. The goal includes various labor groups that are utilized to provide specialized services and provide support for 3,500 staff and nearly 29,000 students through hiring, payroll, paying bills, communications, tech support, mail delivery, upkeep of our facilities, etc. Additionally, our district is required to comply with federal, state, and local laws. We're also governed by what seems to be an endless list of acronyms like OSPI, OSHA, IRS, RCWs, WACS, FERPA, IDF, FAPE, city and county ordinances, in addition to 10 separate collective bargaining agreements, and our own policies and procedures set by the board, to name a few of the rules we have to comply with. And the operations team makes up of those who will make that work happen. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention that our district has been pushing itself to continuously improve. Many departments, especially within the operations goal, have adopted Lean Six Sigma philosophies, and there's a consistent ask of ourselves as to why we do things. Where I appreciate our budget by priorities process most is when we ask questions of why. Our budgeting process has helped us redefine the language that we use to talk about our resources and to bring action to those dollars. Now, in my last few slides, I want to provide an overview of how equity is woven into this budget. The definition of equity is that we'll be using this evening centers around just and fair inclusion. Specifically, an equitable society is one in which all can participate and prosper through the creation of conditions that allow all to reach their full potential. For a focus on equity in the budget, we think of 3 equity topical areas: systems, embedded supports, and intentional efforts to break down barriers for students. Focused systems and practices lead to specific budgets that are meant to support equitable access, embed supports around philosophical ideas and expectations, and lays a foundation for the ongoing efforts to break down barriers for students. While we have focused this evening on each goal of the strategic plan, we have to articulate that what ties to all of our strategic plan points together is a focal point around equity. Our board has set the tone for equity in their core values. It identifies expectations for rigor, equity, quality instruction, results, cultural understanding, all with an expectation that focuses on students first. These values, in concert with our mission and vision, define our expected work of providing equitable outcomes for students. When we're talking about all students, I think this slide is a great visual representation. Each of our nearly 29,000 students and each of the demographic or economic segments that they make up, whether they be students with disabilities, students of color, students in poverty, each of these is represented in the 5 strategic goals because equity is the foundation of our work. We have built our strategic plan benchmarks around these data segments to identify gaps and set goals that are targeted at providing specific supports that close achievement gaps and accelerate learning. And most importantly, with our diverse community comes a diverse set of needs and programs. Systemically, our system is working to develop foundational supports that embeds equity expectations for staff and students. This list provides examples of policies that have been implemented with the expectation of an added level of accountability and clarity. Here we document some of the proposals. You've probably seen a few of these in other slides this evening that outline equitable outcomes for students. And while it's not an exhaustive list, it does show the systemic supports that are in place with defined funding that evidences alignment to our strategic initiatives. We have varying financial supports here. Some are state and federally funded, but where those funds don't meet the need, we fill in with our local funds too. We do more to support equity beyond the programs listed on the previous page. Here are some of the embedded activities that are components of equity, and equity starts with our adults in our systems. These embedded activities also represent a sample of how our resources are working to support equity, including recruitment intention of high quality staff that represent the diverse community we serve, and making sure that we're training all of our staff on equity. As a way to ensure equitable distribution of resources to schools, the district developed a factor called the school score, which is used to rank the complexities factoring in the school's enrollment, free and reduced lunch percentages, students of specialized populations, and other complex needs. We then use that allocation to determine how many resources get put out to a school. Another embedded component of equity is our students' opportunity to choose programs that meet their needs and help them find themselves, which is supported through our choice enrollment programming. Last, I've included some examples in the budget in the way I've seen this district tackle inequitable access. We invest in free college exams, AP and IB exams, SATs. We have free ORCA cards for our high school and middle school students, most of our middle school students, and partnerships that bring in community support and increase access to kids. To that end, I think that this work extends beyond supports that you see here. We're pushing the barriers of operational equity as well, with an effort to bring in more minority and women-owned businesses to work on our building projects and working to hire within the community using those same local tax dollars that are supporting our program. When I began work at the district 14 years ago, we did a rollover budget process, which was essentially taking a look at the prior year's budget and reducing a small percentage or adding a small percentage and implementing that as the new budget. There was little context to what the budgets did. There was no alignment to the strategic plan, and which was in its infancy at the time. And budgets were siloed or personalized, so you really didn't have a lot of visibility into what they were used for. When I think back to that time and look at how far we've come in our 8 years, I'm reminded of how our district has adapted to the changing needs of the community and students. Back then, we were coined a dropout factory. But what I have shared with you this evening and what I represent on this slide above is a significant shift forward from that time. We believe that the preliminary budget that we have developed results in an alignment with our strategic plan that uses our resources to continuously push towards graduating amazing citizens that are connected and supportive of our community. Thank you so much for your participation tonight in our presentation. I have just a few housekeeping items, and then I'm going to send all of you on your way to breakout sessions. So if you have any questions about the information presented today, please email me at cfo@tacoma.k12.wa.us. My team will read all of the questions and comments submitted, and we will share with our school board and put up an FAQ on the district's website. Our webinar was recorded this evening, and videos will be posted on Tacoma Schools by next week. We will also have our formal budget hearing on July 22nd and plan to adopt a proposed budget that we shared with you this evening. And you can visit tacomaschools.org/budget for any additional information. So now to get to the breakout sessions, I'm going to paste a link in, hopefully. And you should be able to go to our interactive budget webpage. That's the page you see on the screen in front of you. Down at the bottom, you'll note that there's a little purple plus sign next to budget breakout sessions, and you can click on that to select the webinar breakout session that you're most interested in. If you want to move from one to the other, that's fine. You're free to do that. And we probably will be ending those sessions around 7:10 p.m. Lastly, if you aren't able to click on that link through the phone, you can access those webinars through tacomaschools.org, and in the Find It Fast tab up in the right-hand corner, type in webinar and it'll take you to this page. My very last slide is just a quick special thanks to Laura, Travis, Mark, Catherine, and Nora for all of their support. They really worked hard to make this happen, of course, to the budget team, because without them, the budget would never have happened. I am so appreciative of everybody's participation this evening. Thank you so much and have a wonderful evening.